This is gonna blow your mind. Today we're diving into some of the most underrated history facts that you probably didn't learn in school. Let's get started. Now I know what you're thinking. History? Isn't that just a long list of dates and dead kings? And to that I say, well, sometimes, but it's also so much more. It's a treasure trove of the bizarre, the hilarious, the utterly unbelievable, and the profoundly human. It's about understanding how we got to this very moment by looking at the strange, winding, and often frankly absurd paths humanity has taken. Today we're bypassing the usual headline-grabbing events, the ones that get entire chapters in textbooks. Instead, we're venturing into the footnotes, the whispered legends, and the wait, did that happen? Moments of our collective past. These are the stories that reveal the sheer unpredictability of human endeavors, the surprising resilience of nature, or sometimes just emus, and the fact that truth is often stranger and far more entertaining than fiction. We're talking about wars fought over pigs, plagues that made people dance themselves to exhaustion, and the time a government decided the best way to dispose of a whale was with dynamite. Yes, really, so buckle up your historical seatbelts because we're about to embark on a journey through 10 mind-blowing events that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the past. These aren't just quirky anecdotes, they're windows into different times, different mindsets, and the enduring, often bewildering tapestry of human experience. Prepare to have your perception of history delightfully skewed, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself as fascinated by these hidden corners of the past as I am. Let's get into it. Alright, let's kick things off down under, in Western Australia, 1932. The Great Depression was hitting hard, and farmers, many of them ex-servicemen settled on marginal lands, were already struggling. Then came the emus. Not just a few, mind you, but an estimated 20,000 of these large, flightless, and apparently very hungry birds, migrating inland after their breeding season and discovering a veritable buffet in the form of wheat crops. These weren't just nuisance birds, they were an agricultural plague, trampling fences, devouring grain, and generally making a nuisance of themselves on a grand scale. The farmers, desperate, appealed to the government for help, and the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce, rather surprisingly, agreed to deploy the military. So, armed with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, a small contingent of soldiers from the Royal Australian Artillery, led by Major G.P.W. Meredith, set out to wage war on the emu population. It sounds like a surefire victory for humanity, right? Machine guns versus birds? Well, the emus, it turned out, were formidable opponents. They proved to be surprisingly adept at guerrilla warfare, splitting into small groups when fired upon, running erratically, and possessing an uncanny ability to absorb bullets without, dying. Major Meredith himself was quoted admiring their remarkable capacity for carrying lead. After several frustrating and largely ineffective engagements, with a hilariously low kill rate, the military withdrew. The emus, for all intents and purposes, had won. Next, we travel back to Strasbourg, Alsace in the Holy Roman Empire, July 1518. It all began with one woman, a Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began to dance. Not just a little jig, but a fervent, days-long, unstoppable dance. There was no music, just an inexplicable compulsion. Within a week she had been joined by over 30 other people, and by August, the number of compulsive dancers had swelled to around 400. The city authorities were baffled and frankly alarmed. This wasn't a joyful celebration. It was a disturbing, exhausting, and sometimes fatal phenomenon. People were literally dancing themselves to death from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer exhaustion. The authorities, operating under the medical theories of the time, initially believed the cause was hot blood and, rather counterintuitively, prescribed dancing. They even cleared out guild halls, erected a wooden stage, and hired musicians, thinking that if the afflicted danced it out of their systems, they'd be cured. This, as you might imagine, only exacerbated the problem, creating an even more public and perhaps contagious spectacle. Modern theories range from ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on rye and can cause hallucinations and spasms, to mass psychogenic illness, a kind of widespread stress-induced hysteria. Whatever the cause, the dancing plague remains a chilling reminder of how little we understood and perhaps still understand about the human mind and body under extreme circumstances. Fast forward to a more modern yet equally bizarre incident, Florence, Oregon, November 1970. A 45-foot, 8-ton sperm whale washed up on the beach. Now, a decaying whale carcass presents a significant problem. It's enormous, it smells terrible, and it's not exactly easy to move. The Oregon Highway Division was tasked with its disposal, and after some deliberation, they landed on what seemed like a bold, decisive solution: dynamite. The idea, spearheaded by engineer George Thornton, was that a controlled explosion would disintegrate the whale into small, manageable pieces, which scavengers like seagulls would then conveniently clean up. What could possibly go wrong? Well, pretty much everything. They used half a ton of dynamite, a quantity later deemed far excessive. On November 12th, with local news crews filming, the dynamite was detonated. Instead of neatly vaporizing, the whale exploded in a shower of enormous flying chunks of blubber. Spectators, who had been moved back a quarter of a mile, were rained upon with foul-smelling whale parts. A huge piece of blubber famously crushed the roof of a nearby car. The smaller pieces? The seagulls reportedly were scared off by the blast and didn't come near. The remaining large sections of the whale still had to be buried by workers. The incident became an instant, if macabre, legend, a testament to good intentions meeting spectacularly messy reality. Chapter 4. The Pig War, a porky prelude to potential conflict. Let's journey to 1859, to the San Juan Islands, nestled between the mainland United States and Vancouver Island. At the time, the sovereignty of these islands was disputed between the United States and Great Britain. Both nations had citizens living there, and tensions, while not exactly at boiling point, were certainly simmering. Enter Lyman Cutler, an American farmer, who, on June 15th, found a rather large black pig rooting around in his potato patch. This wasn't the first time. Annoyed, Cutler shot and killed the pig. The pig, as it turned out, belonged to Charles Griffin, an Irishman employed by the British Hudson's Bay Company. Griffin was not pleased. Cutler offered $10 in compensation. Griffin demanded $100. The argument escalated, and soon American settlers called for military protection. Britain responded by sending warships. Before long, a standoff ensued. A few hundred American soldiers with cannons faced off against British naval power. For several tense weeks, the fate of Anglo-American relations, and potentially peace itself, hinged on a dead pig and a patch of potatoes. Thankfully, cooler heads eventually prevailed. Officials on both sides were aghast that such a trivial incident could escalate so dramatically. Negotiations led to a joint military occupation of the island until the dispute was finally settled by international arbitration in 1872, with the islands awarded to the United States, all because of one hungry hog. Chapter 5. The Erfurt latrine disaster, a truly crappy way to go. Prepare yourselves because this next one is, well, it's a bit gross. We're going way back to Erfurt, Germany, in the year 1184. King Henry VI of Germany, later Holy Roman Emperor, was holding basically a royal diet or council meeting in the Petersburg Citadel. Numerous nobles from across the Holy Roman Empire had gathered in a large room on the second floor of the provost's residence. They were there to mediate a feud between Landgrave Ludwig III of Thuringia and Archbishop Conrad of Mainz. Important people discussing important matters. The sheer weight of all these assembled dignitaries, however, proved too much for the ancient wooden floor. Suddenly, with a terrible crash, the floor collapsed. The nobles, clergy, and their retinues plunged into the latrine pit, the cesspool, located directly beneath the assembly hall in the cellar. It's estimated that around 60 people died, including many prominent counts and aristocrats, either from the fall itself or, horrifyingly, by drowning in the accumulated liquid excrement. King Henry VI himself was only saved because he was sitting in an alcove with a stone floor. It's a grim, almost farcical tragedy that underscores the often precarious nature of medieval infrastructure, and it serves as a rather pungent reminder that even the most powerful figures were not immune to sudden, undignified, and frankly, disgusting ends. Chapter 6. The Battle of Los Angeles, when paranoia filled the skies. Now let's jump to a more recent but equally bewildering event, the Battle of Los Angeles in the early hours of February 25, 1942. This was less than 3 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and West Coast anxiety about a Japanese attack was at an absolute fever pitch. Air raid sirens wailed across Los Angeles County after radar picked up an unidentified object. A total blackout was ordered, and then, the sky erupted. For over an hour, anti-aircraft batteries pumped an estimated 1,440 shells into the darkness, their searchlights frantically crisscrossing the sky, hunting for enemy planes that, as it turned out, weren't actually there. The battle caused considerable panic and property damage from falling shell fragments. Tragically, 3 civilians were killed in car accidents during the blackout, and at least 2 others died from heart attacks attributed to the stress of the hour-long barrage. So what caused it? The official explanation at the time was war nerves, and perhaps a weather balloon that had drifted off course, its appearance magnified by the tense atmosphere. Some still speculate about UFOs, but the most likely culprit was simply a case of mass hysteria fueled by genuine fear and the fog of war. It's a stark illustration of how easily fear can escalate into chaos even with the best intentions of defenders. Chapter 7. Tulip Mania, the flower that crashed an economy. So, let's delve into the world of economics, specifically one of history's most famous speculative bubbles, tulip mania, in the Dutch Golden Age. During the early 17th century, tulips, recently introduced from the Ottoman Empire, became an incredible status symbol in the Netherlands. They were exotic, beautiful, and some rare varieties, particularly those with broken colors caused by a virus, became extraordinarily coveted. Prices for certain bulbs began to skyrocket, far beyond their intrinsic horticultural worth. People weren't just buying tulips to plant in their gardens, they were buying them as investments, expecting the prices to rise indefinitely. At the peak of tulip mania, around 1636-37, single bulbs of rare varieties like the Semper Augustus were reportedly trading for more than the cost of a house in Amsterdam, or for vast quantities of goods like livestock, wheat, and cheese. Fortunes were made overnight. People mortgaged their homes and businesses to get in on the action. Then, in February 1637, with no single clear trigger, confidence evaporated. The bubble burst, prices plummeted, and many investors were ruined. While the long-term economic devastation is debated by historians, tulip mania remains a classic cautionary tale about the psychology of crowds, speculative frenzy, and the dangers of believing that prices can only ever go up. This next one is truly macabre and speaks volumes about the intense political and religious rivalries of its time. We're in Rome, January 897 AD, for what is known as the Cadaver Synod, or Synodus Horrenda. Pope Stephen VI, driven by a complex web of political vendettas and a desire to invalidate the acts of his predecessor, ordered the corpse of Pope Formosus, who had been dead for about 9 months, to be exhumed. Yes, you heard that right. They dug up a dead pope to put him on trial. The decomposing body of Formosus was dressed in full papal vestments, propped up on a throne in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, and formally accused of various crimes including perjury and acceding to the papacy illegally. A deacon was appointed to speak for the deceased Formosus, though it's safe to say his defense wasn't particularly vigorous. Unsurprisingly, the corpse was found guilty. As punishment, Formosus's papal acts were annulled. The fingers he had used for blessings were hacked off, his papal vestments were torn from him, and his body was eventually thrown into the Tiber River. This grotesque spectacle horrified even the standards of 9th century Rome, and led to a public uprising that deposed Stephen VI, who was himself later imprisoned and strangled. It's a chilling example of how far political and personal hatred could go, even extending beyond the grave. Let's move to Boston, Massachusetts, January 15, 1919. It was an unseasonably warm day. In the city's north end, a massive storage tank, 50 feet tall and 90 feet in diameter, owned by the Purity Distilling Company, held over 2 million gallons of crude molasses. This molasses was destined to be fermented into industrial alcohol for munitions, as World War I had just ended, but production was still ongoing. Suddenly, witnesses reported hearing a series of rumbles like machine gun fire, as the rivets on the tank began to pop. Then, the tank catastrophically failed. A colossal wave of molasses, estimated to be up to 25 feet high at its peak, burst forth. moving at an astonishing 35 miles per hour. This wasn't just a sticky mess, it was a destructive, deadly torrent. The wave crushed buildings, buckled the girders of an elevated railway, and engulfed everything in its path. People and animals were caught in the viscous, suffocating tide. In the end, 21 people lost their lives and about 150 were injured. The cleanup took weeks, with salt water eventually used to wash the sticky residue into the harbor. For decades afterwards, residents claimed that on hot summer days, the north end still smelled faintly of molasses. The cause was later attributed to a poorly constructed and overfilled tank, unable to withstand the pressure and thermal expansion. Our final bizarre historical footnote takes us to the border between Greece and Bulgaria in October 1925, an event colorfully known as the War of the Stray Dog, or the Incident at Petric. Relations between the two countries were already incredibly tense, a legacy of various Balkan wars and ongoing territorial disputes. On October 19th, according to one common version of the story, a Greek soldier ran across the border into Bulgarian territory, allegedly chasing after his stray dog. Bulgarian border guards, seeing an armed Greek soldier on their soil, opened fire and killed him. This seemingly minor incident rapidly escalated. Greece, outraged, issued an ultimatum to Bulgaria, demanding punishment for those responsible, an official apology, and reparations. When Bulgaria offered a more muted response and proposed a joint commission, Greece, under the firm hand of dictator Theodoros Pangalos, rejected it and launched an invasion of Bulgaria, occupying several villages. The situation threatened to spiral into a full-blown Balkan war. Fortunately, the League of Nations intervened swiftly, condemning the Greek invasion and ordering a ceasefire and Greek withdrawal. Greece was also ordered to pay reparations to Bulgaria. It's a stark reminder of how easily small, almost absurd incidents can ignite serious international conflicts, when underlying tensions are high and national pride is on the line. And there you have it, 10 of history's most mind-blowing, underrated, and frankly, sometimes hilarious, sometimes terrifying, facts that probably didn't make it into your school curriculum. From emus outsmarting machine guns to a dead pope on trial, and from a sugary tsunami to a war sparked by a wandering dog, these stories show us that the past is far weirder and more complex than we often imagine. It's a landscape filled with human folly, incredible resilience, and the kind of events that make you tilt your head and say, wait, what? These aren't just amusing diversions, they offer genuine insights. They remind us that big historical forces are often shaped by small, unexpected events, that human nature remains remarkably consistent in its capacity for both brilliance and absurdity, and that sometimes, the most memorable history is made in the margins. Learning about these moments helps us appreciate the full spectrum of human experience and perhaps even approach our own times with a bit more humility and a keener eye for the unexpected. History, it turns out, has a fantastic sense of humor and an even better sense of irony. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these underrated history facts, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating content. See you next time. I hope this journey through the otter side of history has been as enlightening for you as it is for me to share. Let me know in the comments which of these facts blew your mind the most, or if there are any other obscure historical events you think we should cover.